It's the kind of silence that presses against your chest, the kind that makes you realize just how small you are in the world. Past midnight, the streets of Mill Creek were empty. Streetlights hummed above cracked sidewalks, flickering like tired eyes that struggled to stay awake. Nina, a 22-year-old college student, hugged her jacket tighter as she made her way home from her late-night library shift. She had walked this route 100 times before. But tonight something felt different. The night wasn't peaceful, it was watching. Nina's footsteps echoed louder than she expected, bouncing off the empty storefronts and cracked sidewalks like the world itself was amplifying her presence. She had walked this road 100 times, but tonight the silence pressed in differently, heavy and suffocating, as if the town itself had fallen asleep and left her behind. The streetlights flickered in uneven intervals, spilling islands of pale yellow light onto the pavement while leaving wide pools of darkness between them. Each time she crossed from light to shadow, her pulse quickened. She hated the way her imagination filled the gaps, shapes shifting at the edge of her vision, shadows that seemed to stretch just a little too far. She tightened her grip on her phone. The glow of the screen was comforting, but it also reminded her of how fragile she really was. One call away from help, yet completely alone. The world outside that glow felt enormous, hostile. Then came the sound. At first it was so faint she almost convinced herself she imagined it. Another set of footsteps. They matched hers perfectly, timed like an echo that shouldn't exist. She stopped, holding her breath. Silence. Only the faint buzz of a street lamp overhead. She exhaled shakily and forced herself to keep moving. But the moment her sneakers scraped the pavement again, there it was. The faint, deliberate rhythm of someone walking behind her. Nina's skin prickled. She turned quickly, heart hammering. Nothing. The street was empty, stretching back into the darkness. No cars, no movement, just silence. Her grandmother's voice floated back to her in memory, a childhood warning whispered before bed. It's not the darkness you should fear, Nina. It's the things that wake when the world goes quiet. She shook the thought from her head. That was just an old story, just paranoia. As she passed a row of houses, her eyes caught on something that froze her blood. In a second-story window framed by tattered curtains, a figure stood. Perfectly still, watching. Nina blinked, and the window was empty. Her heart thundered as she hurried forward, every step sharper, faster. The silence no longer felt like absence, it felt alive, as if something was listening, waiting. Nina's breathing was shallow as she crossed into the older part of town. The buildings here leaned inward as if sharing secrets, their wood siding weathered, paint peeling like dead skin. The streets felt narrower, the lamps fewer, and the shadows thicker. She tried to steady herself, reminding her legs to move one step at a time. Her phone's battery icon glowed a thin red sliver, 5% left. She quickly slipped it into her pocket, unwilling to waste its light yet terrified of losing that lifeline completely. Halfway down the block, she stopped. There, under the last flickering streetlight at the far end of the street, stood a figure. At first, Nina told herself it was just a man, someone out late, maybe walking home like her, but as she stared, dread pooled in her stomach. The figure didn't move. It didn't shift its weight, didn't breathe, didn't even sway in the faint night breeze. It simply stood there, head tilted slightly to one side as if it had been waiting. Her heart slammed against her ribs. "Hello?" she called, her voice trembling and too loud in the silence. No answer. The stillness stretched, unbearable. She took a cautious step backward. The figure took a step forward. Nina froze. Her breath hitched painfully in her chest. It wasn't just moving, it was gliding, smooth and unnatural, as though its feet didn't touch the ground. The distance between them didn't close quickly, but the weight of its presence pressed down on her, suffocating. "Stay away," she whispered, though the words cracked and broke in the night air. The figure stopped again, halfway beneath the flickering lamp. For a moment, the light caught its shape and Nina's stomach turned. Its arms were too long, its head bent at an angle that no human neck could hold. Shadows clung to it, rippling like smoke even as the night stood still. Her instinct screamed at her to run, but her legs felt anchored, heavy with terror. Then the figure tilted its head further, impossibly far, as if curious. And though its face was hidden, she felt it smiling. Nina's instincts finally took control. She bolted. Her sneakers slapped against the cracked pavement, each step echoing like a gunshot through the hollow streets. She didn't dare look back, but she felt it. The weight of something inhuman sliding after her, closing the gap without sound. She darted into a side street, lungs burning, hoping to lose it in the maze of narrow roads. But the moment she turned, something was wrong. The street seemed longer than it should have been. The houses leaned at unnatural angles, their windows yawning like empty eyes. Street signs pointed in directions she didn't recognize, twisting in circles that led nowhere. Her town was warping around her. Her breath came in shallow bursts as she pushed forward. The silence was broken now, not just by her footsteps but by whispers. At first faint, then clearer. They threaded through the night like invisible hands tugging at her mind. Nina. She stumbled, nearly falling. Her name spoken softly, urgently, from a dozen voices layered atop one another. It came from the walls, the shadows, the very air. No, she whispered, pressing her hands over her ears. But it didn't help. The voices slid inside her skull, growing louder, filling her with dread. She risked a glance back. The figure was closer, much closer. No matter how fast she ran, it seemed to glide effortlessly, closing the distance with each heartbeat. Its shape had grown taller, stretched thinner, its arms dragging along the ground as though the darkness itself was pulling it forward. Nina's vision blurred with tears. She cut through an alley, her backpack banging against her shoulders, but the walls rose higher than she remembered, narrowing until the space felt like a coffin. The whispers swelled. "Stop running. Come with us. You belong here." Her chest tightened, panic clawing at her lungs. This wasn't just about dying. She realized that now. It wanted more. It wanted her will, her spirit. It wanted to strip her bare and keep her trapped in this endless nightmare of streets that no longer obeyed the laws of reality. She skidded to a halt. The alley ended in a cul-de-sac, a dead end. The shadow figure glided closer, silent and inevitable, and Nina had nowhere left to run. Nina pressed her back against the cold brick wall, her chest heaving as if her lungs were on fire. The alley's dead end loomed behind her. No doors, no fire escapes, no chance of slipping away. Her trembling hands fumbled at her phone, but the screen glowed only long enough to show her battery had died. The last sliver of hope vanished into blackness. The figure was closer now. It hovered at the mouth of the cul-de-sac, tall and impossibly thin, its form rippling as though stitched together from smoke and shadow. Its arms dangled like ropes dragging along the ground, and its head tilted at that unnatural broken angle. The whispers returned, not from its mouth but from everywhere at once. "You can't escape. Give in. We've been waiting for you." Nina's knees buckled. She slid down the wall, clutching her backpack to her chest like a shield. Every instinct screamed at her to curl up, to hide, to surrender. Fear clawed at her insides, feeding the thing that crept closer, and then, like a candle flickering in the dark, her grandmother's voice rose in her memory. "The dead of night is hungry, child. But fear is its feast. Show it courage and it will starve." Her sobs slowed. She wiped her tears with the back of her sleeve and forced herself upright. Her legs shook violently, but she stood. "No," she whispered at first. Then louder, steadier. "No, you don't own me." The shadow halted. Its head twitched. The whispers faltered like a radio losing signal. Nina took a step forward. Her heart thundered, but her voice gained strength. "You're not real. You're nothing without my fear." The air thickened, vibrating with rage. The figure shuddered violently, its outline flickering like static. It hissed, a sound like glass shattering in her skull. Her body wanted to collapse, but she lifted her chin and shouted, the words tearing out of her chest. "I am not afraid of you." The figure screamed, a piercing, unnatural wail that rattled the bricks around her. Its body twisted and unraveled. Fragments of smoke ripped away as though burned by invisible fire. With a final shriek, it burst apart into the night, leaving only silence behind. Nina staggered, trembling but alive, standing in the hollow stillness where her fear had once lived. Nina stumbled out of the alley, every muscle in her body quivering. The streets were empty again, eerily still as if nothing had happened. The shadows no longer stretched unnaturally. The street signs pointed the right way. The world was back to normal, or at least it looked that way. Her legs carried her forward in shaky, uneven steps. By the time she reached her neighborhood, the horizon was bleeding faint shades of pink and gold. Dawn was coming. The first birds had begun to sing, their fragile melodies brushing against her like threads of hope. She climbed her porch steps on weak legs and leaned against the doorframe, struggling to catch her breath. For a long moment she just stood there listening. Silence. Blessed, ordinary silence. Inside, her small bedroom felt like a sanctuary. She collapsed onto the bed, burying her face in her hands. Relief washed over her in waves, but it was tangled with something else, a gnawing unease that refused to leave. She lifted her head and caught her reflection in the mirror across the room. For a second, she was just herself. Messy hair, tear-streaked face, hoodie clinging to her shoulders. But then her blood turned to ice. Behind her reflection, in the faint glow of dawn, another shadow lingered. Tall, thin, out of sync with her movements. Nina whipped around. Nothing. The room was empty. Her breath hitched. She turned back to the mirror. Only herself this time. But she couldn't shake the chill crawling along her spine. She sat by the window instead, hugging her knees, eyes fixed on the sunrise. The warmth of the light calmed her, but her mind replayed every moment of the night. The pursuit. The whispers. The act of standing her ground. She realized something profound in that silence. She had survived not because the night let her go, but because she chose not to give it what it wanted. Her fear. And yet, she knew the dead of night would come again. It always does. Her lips pressed into a trembling smile as she whispered to herself. Next time, I'll be ready. The birds sang louder. The light grew stronger. But somewhere in the hush between their songs, a faint whisper lingered, waiting.